Dr. Mbava, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Prime News on 3.
Thank you so much, Simpiwe. Good to be here.
Indeed, it's an absolute pleasure having you join us this evening because it's a very, very important discussion, involving, these multinational companies, because it does appear that whenever they decide to engage in malfeasance or illicit activity, they always look south. And is this an indication, perhaps, in your view, that South Africa has now become a fertile breeding ground for corruption, especially for these multinational companies? I mean, we've seen the likes of KPMG, McKinsey, SAP, and now Bain and Company.
Absolutely. And I think these developments actually point to the fact that South Africa must now take decisive action. We have seen the Zondo Commission, we have seen the reports, we have seen the recommendations. Despite this, there has not been any evidence of consequence. But what is quite clear now is that there are actions to combat corruption at a global level. So South Africa now must emulate the UK and actually take action. We must be decisive. So it's a welcome intervention. It's a welcome action by the UK, but it is coming from outside South Africa. It would have been better if South Africa has, from the very beginning, actually taken action through our own prosecutional institutions to actually hold Bain accountable.
You're very emphatic on South Africa having to take action, but it begs the question, who in particular needs to take action against this? Is it the authorities? And if so, what are they expected to do? Could it be the banks? I mean, the banks should have spotted suspicious activity much sooner or even immediately. The fact that they did not, does that make them complicit to the malfeasance that's been perpetuated in perpetuity by these multinational companies?
I think what they were waiting for action, because if there's no action, there was no real action against Bain in the South African context. So now, given these new developments, there are possible fears of reputational damage or fear of contagion by association. So it means that now these companies now will have to review and relook their relationships with Bain and other similar companies as well who are also implicated. So what this means is that there must be actually more scrutiny now into the Zondo Commission reports and other reports as well. The Nugent report was the first report actually to cast very, very strong findings against what happened at SARS. And there was no real action. And then the Zondo reaffirmed those findings. So I think the prosecution authorities actually need to take action. So the question is, why did the NPA and the SIU did not take action? Is it because they did not have capacity or there was no political will to do so? Those are the questions we must ask. But now we have been shown the way by the UK. So we must, in South Africa now, start to implement action and actually emulate what has been done already. Because now at a global level, quite clear that even the US might also follow suit and actually disassociate itself from all companies which are implicated.
Well, investigators may argue that they are not afforded proper resourcing to carry out investigations. I mean, what about cross-border cooperation? Because corruption perpetuated on a grand scale is normally cross-country.
Yeah, so what needs to happen is that enforcement agencies must be able to work across borders to make sure that these crimes are investigated. We see now that the Guptas themselves will be held accountable as well at an international level. So these developments also show us that the Zondo Commission findings now have a global impact. They are actually, ironically, being implemented by other countries in a way. Because if you look at the UK developments, these were actually emanating from the Zondo Commission findings. And yet, on our home ground, we have yet to actually act on those findings. So we are actually now taking the lead, or will be taking the lead, we hope, from what the UK has done.
Do you think politicians have a role to play in multinational corporations, corruption on state, on state-owned entities in South Africa, or is it simply, the role of the corporate sector?
I think politicians must take a decisive stance. But what you find is that politicians themselves, who might be implicated, do not have the political will to actually take action. So what we need then is a strong state, a capable state, which hold them accountable to actually deal with malfeasance, deal with corruption, have ethical leadership. So as the Financial and Fiscal Commission, which is a fiscal body which I lead, we have recently unpacked our findings on how state institutions can be strengthened and capacitated. One of the key issues that we are raising there is that these institutions must be given powers to act, must be given budgets to act, and their budgets must also be independent from departments, which, by the way, they are supposed to investigate. So there's a sort of a conflict of interest in some instances. So what we say is that to strengthen these bodies that are meant to investigate all these criminal misconducts and malfeasance, you need to capacitate them, give them the right budgets, and also make sure they're independent from departments, because this is where the problem is. And also we find that some of them, in terms of their mandates, they overlap. So some people don't even know what they're supposed to do, because they all have mandates which overlap.
Right. Dr. Mbava, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.